She says her ex was obsessive and abusive and didn't have a great relationship with his mom when she died of a toxic overdose. But her defense also says the woman's husband had been having an affair with her sister months before she died. Who's really to blame? This is the story of Kaitlyn Conley, the woman accused of poisoning her ex-boyfriend's mom, and the latest news in her case. Hi friends, I'm Katie, and this is Katie Does Crime. Thank you for joining me for the first time if you're new here. I'm a Midwesterner who now lives in New York City, putting my writing degree to use by researching true crime cases that interest me, and hopefully you. And hello to the usual rapscallions and reprobates. Please consider subscribing or joining me on Patreon if you'd like to hear more true crime stories. There's new news in the poisoning case of Kaitlyn Conley, so I thought I'd start from the beginning today. When Dr. Mary Louise Yoder was taken to the hospital on July 20th, 2015, and died 2 days later, it was unexpected. She and her husband owned a chiropractic office in Whitesboro, New York, near Syracuse, and she had seemed perfectly healthy before her sudden death at 60 years old. She loved gardening and dancing, especially Bollywood and African dancing. She sang and drummed in the world music choir, and she had all of the energy in the world for her grandkids. And evidently, someone in the family was suspicious that such a vibrant woman could suddenly die so young. Mary's sister called the sheriff and asked that they take a close look into how Mary died. And wouldn't you know, after 2 months of blood work and consultations with poison control, her cause of death was eventually determined to be homicide. Mary had a toxic level of the drug colchicine in her system, an anti-inflammatory used to treat gout. In large amounts, it causes nausea and vomiting before shutting down internal organs. It took months of investigating, but finally, the following June, an arrest in the case was made. Her name was Kaitlyn Conley, and she was a 23-year-old who had worked at the reception desk at Mary and her husband's office for 4 years. She was charged with 2 counts of falsifying business records in the first degree, 1 count of forgery in the second degree, and 2 counts of petty larceny. She allegedly signed Mary's husband's name on a parking ticket and took $90 from the business to pay for a traffic toll violation. But more importantly, she had made up a letter of intent and a W-9 tax form to give to a chemical company for the purchase of the drug colchicine under the business's name. It was ordered all the way back in January 2015, 6 months before Mary died. What really offended people is that the day after Mary's death, Kaitlyn had posted kind words about her to Facebook. "If love could have saved you, you would have lived forever. Dr. Mary, I still can't believe you're gone. Yesterday was so sudden. You truly were a positive light in the world, and I'm so lucky and thankful our lives crossed paths. There wasn't a day I didn't look forward to work with you. You taught me so much and had such a profound impact on my life. Everyone appreciated your attention, stories, and laughter. We will remember you for your light, energy, and strength, and the best way I can think to honor your life is to emulate your genuine, cheerful, and kind spirit. You will be sorely missed and lovingly remembered. God has gained the best angel. We love you." There was no reason for Kaitlyn nor anyone else to kill Mary. She had been in business for 28 years and was one of those pillar of the community type people who had genuinely healed her clients. And here she was, killed by a single deadly dose of a medicine meant to help people. According to Syracuse.com, you can buy 250 milligrams of the drug online for about $80. I didn't Google this myself because my search history is already so very incriminating, but apparently the kind Kaitlyn allegedly ordered was research grade, more pure than the average stuff a doctor could get their hands on. The authorities weren't naming a motive, but it seemed kind of obvious that it had something to do with Mary's son. Kaitlyn had been in a sometimes relationship with 26-year-old Adam Yoder. She was actually named as his partner in Mary's obituary, Katie Conley, although reports say that they were just friends at the time. And Kaitlyn seemed like such a nice young lady. While at Mohawk Valley Community College in 2012 and 2013, and then later at the State University of New York Polytechnic Institute in Utica, she made the dean's list for her high grade point average. She said she'd never even heard of the drug used to kill Mary. She was released on bond but had to hand over her passport, and then later she rejected a plea deal and maintained her innocence. But the thing is, Kaitlyn had already admitted to something that the police were mighty suspicious of. See, there were these 2 letters sent to the sheriff's office and the medical examiner's office in November of 2015. They said that Mary's youngest son, Adam, was the poisoner and that the bottle of colchicine could be found under the passenger seat of his Jeep. And that is where they found it, along with a receipt that showed a Gmail address with his name on it, mradamyoder1990@gmail.com. The only thing is, why would he be keeping the murder weapon in his vehicle 4 months later? And why would he consent to the police searching it? Adam said that not only did he not own that Gmail account on the receipt, but he'd been out of town visiting his sister for a week when his mom died. The drug that killed her generally only takes 24 to 48 hours to act, so he couldn't have been the one to give it to her. Investigators brought Kaitlyn in for an interview in December just to get an idea of how Mary and her family got along, and it was then that she admitted to being the one to write the letters. Unfortunately, because they were interviewing her as a witness and not a suspect at the time, they hadn't read Kaitlyn her Miranda rights, which is kind of wild to me because they already knew some interesting things about Kaitlyn that probably should have marked her as a suspect. Like, the Gmail account found on that receipt under Mary's son Adam's passenger seat had been accessed from an IP address at Kaitlyn's house and from Kaitlyn's phone. She said Adam must have used her devices to log into the account, but she also said she hadn't seen him for months. So I guess he must have used her device without her seeing him? But now, since Kaitlyn hadn't been under oath when she admitted to writing the letters, and since her interview hadn't been recorded, a judge had to rule if the admission would be allowed in court. In pretrial paperwork, the defense argued that Mary's husband was the real killer. They said that not only did he have access to the drug by working at the office, but that he actually had gout, the thing that colchicine is used to treat. And also, just a few months after Mary died, her husband started dating her sister. Mary's other sisters said she had a troubled marriage, and the defense attorney said witnesses would testify that Mary's husband was already shacking up with her sister before she died. But the assistant DA said their relationship happened naturally after Mary's death, when he turned to Mary's sister during his time of grief. Trial began in April 2017 with Kaitlyn's defense saying she had no motive to kill Mary, who was a good friend and a good employer. He said that Mary's husband, William Yoder, on the other hand, had been seeing Mary's sister secretly for 6 months. They had been spotted at a restaurant an hour away, holding hands and acting all lovey-dovey. William also went to the funeral home the day after Mary died and tried to get her cremated, which of course would have stopped that extra investigation that led to her death being ruled a homicide. He also went home while Mary was in the hospital, and when he came back, he brought his 3 children with him, along with Kaitlyn. At first, it made me wonder, was she not the actual killer, but an accomplice? Because her DNA was found on the colchicine in Adam's Jeep and the package it was delivered in. But that doesn't mean she was the one to give the lethal dose to Mary. And the typewriter at her desk was used to address the envelopes containing the anonymous letters about Adam being the murderer. But anyone could have used that, including Mary's husband, who of course had a key to the office and could access it at any time. And Kaitlyn bought a prepaid debit card that was used to buy the drug, but did someone else give her the money if she's stealing $90 from the office to pay for a toll violation? Mary's husband also had a pot farm down south, and colchicine can be used on seeds to induce favorable traits in the plants. What I love is that at trial, basically no one pointed a finger at Mary's son, Adam, whom the defense called a whacked-out alcoholic drug-using weirdo. The pathologist who conducted Mary's autopsy read the anonymous letter Kaitlyn wrote to the authorities about him aloud to the court. It said that Adam and his mom had a standoffish relationship, maybe because of his problems with alcohol, and he thought she should have helped him more. He hoped that people would be nicer to him after his mom's death, and also assumed a financial payout was coming his way. It said he regretted killing her when the money didn't pan out. It was, of course, known by this time that Kaitlyn wrote the letter, but in it, she said that she didn't want to have her name attached to turning in her friend, but that she worried he was capable of doing it again. And maybe the jury believed her, because they announced that with 10 people in favor of a not guilty verdict and 2 people in favor of a guilty one, they couldn't reach an agreement. A mistrial was declared. Kaitlyn herself seemed a little surprised that 10 people believed her in a later interview, but one juror said that there was this one guy who kept kind of swaying people over to his side. She called them the smokers, so I guess they were going out for cigarette breaks, and this guy was convincing them Kaitlyn was innocent. It turns out that he had once rented a home from Kaitlyn's parents and definitely should not have been allowed on that jury. But it didn't matter now. Kaitlyn was getting a new trial. In preparation for the second trial, with more time on his hands, a digital forensic analyst found backups of Kaitlyn's cell phone on Adam's computer, made long before she was being investigated. It wasn't known if this was something he did on purpose because he wanted to track his girlfriend's goings-on, or if he had some setting where every time someone plugged their phone into his computer, it made a backup. Either way, the analyst found a lot of files that had been deleted by the time Kaitlyn had to hand over her phone to the authorities. One of these files was a note about the Mr. Adam Yoder 1990 at gmail.com address that showed the password for it was A is gay, as in Adam is gay. Kaitlyn says she's never used the word gay as a slur that way and wouldn't have set that password. Other files that had been deleted were screenshots of information about poisons, including colchicine. That was one of the last poisons researched, like the person stopped looking because they had found the one. So at Kaitlyn's first trial, I mentioned that the defense went hard on Mary's husband, William, because he was definitely dating Mary's sister 2 months after her death and was allegedly having that affair with her many months earlier. But the thing is, after Mary's death, William had texted Mary's sister about coming over to visit and had asked for her address, which would be a pretty unnecessary thing to do if you'd already been dating the woman for months. Now, of course, there's a chance that William did this for show, as a way to throw off the cops if they ever started looking at him. And there's a chance that he and Mary's sister had been seeing each other for months, but he never went to her house to keep the affair more under wraps. But it's probably more likely that he just really wasn't dating her before Mary died. So at the second trial, Kaitlyn's new lawyer went after Mary's son, Adam, showing that his dating relationship with Kaitlyn was a toxic one because of him. But the prosecution used the same text to say that yes, their relationship had become toxic, and that's precisely why Kaitlyn was trying to frame him, for revenge. She didn't want him to die, she wanted his mom to die so he would rot in prison. Apparently the jury was having a hard time coming to an agreement on the murder charge again, so the judge allowed the jury to consider manslaughter this time. He wanted to avoid another mistrial. And the jury went for that, finding Kaitlyn guilty of first-degree manslaughter. In January 2018, she was sentenced to 23 years in prison. While 2 of Mary's sisters asked for the maximum sentence, one of them said Kaitlyn was framed. When speaking to the judge, Kaitlyn said, "With all respect to the justice system, I'm innocent." And in January 2025, her conviction was actually overturned. The Supreme Court of New York found on appeal that Kaitlyn didn't have effective legal representation. The court said that her lawyers should have challenged the admission of evidence from her phone at trial. Because although the authorities had a warrant that allowed them to seize her phone, it shouldn't have allowed them to search her phone. The idea being that a person's phone has so much personal information on it these days that it's almost more private than their home and needs a higher level of protection. Kaitlyn's previous lawyer admitted that he should have looked more closely at the warrant and tried to suppress the evidence from her phone. The appeals court said that if her lawyer had motioned to suppress that evidence, he would have won and her trial could have gone a completely different way. After serving around 7 years, Kaitlyn was released from prison in February 2025 and will have to wait and see if her case will be retried. It's not clear if the prosecution could get a conviction if the evidence from her phone can't be used, but if Adam's computer backup of her phone can be used, that might change things drastically. I watched the Hulu documentary on this case recently, Little Miss Innocent, which I highly recommend if you want to see Kaitlyn tell her story and get a sense of what she's like as a person. I've told you before that I'm way too gullible, but I wanted to believe her at the beginning of this documentary. But as time wore on, I became less convinced.
Did you kill Mary Yoder?
Sorry. No, I did not kill Mary Yoder.
I try not to judge people on body language and things like that, but there's this one moment where she begins to cry, where her chin quivers so hard, but I didn't see any tears. And I feel like it takes some mental gymnastics to think that someone else did it. The simplest answer is usually the right one. Mary's son Adam was out of town when the poisoning happened, and he willingly let the police search his Jeep, so it probably was not him. A book about this case, We Thought We Knew You, explains that the backups of Kaitlyn's phone were on his laptop because she would plug in to download things like audiobooks from his computer to her phone. Mary's husband, William, had to text Mary's sister after the funeral to find out her address, so they probably weren't having an affair. Meanwhile, Kaitlyn's DNA was on the colchicine found in Adam's Jeep. Kaitlyn's IP address and phone were the ones used to access the Gmail account that ordered the drug, and she admitted to buying the prepaid debit cards used to order it. Kaitlyn's phone researched poisons. And something else that hit me pretty hard. Kaitlyn told the police once that Adam assaulted her and provided pictures that showed her injuries. But a digital forensic analyst found that the photos were taken on her phone far before she said she was assaulted. They seem to be related to a horseback riding incident she had. I believe women, and I know it takes a lot of courage for a woman to come forward, and I know sometimes women aren't taken seriously if they don't have evidence to support their claim. But using old photos from an accident isn't the way to do it. I will say that I thought it was pretty wild that Kaitlyn was given almost the max sentence when she had no prior convictions. And I thought it was really gross how Mary's daughter said she would be fine if Kaitlyn served 22 years and then was killed in prison. But I'm dying to know, would you have convicted her on the evidence, or are there too many questions remaining for you? As always, please let me know what you think about this case in the comments. Thank you for tuning in today. I'm just a true crime fan like you are, and I really appreciate you taking a chance on me. Please like and subscribe to my channel if you like spending this time together. I would be so appreciative. Until next time, I'm Katie, and this has been Katie Does Crime.